The Perils of Poland was the world's most deadly balancing act of 1957. In 1958, the dangers will hang heavier over Warsaw and over the world. Because here, for the first time, is the final balance of power. Communism weighed in the same scales with freedom. Poland's attempt to build a life composed of 2 parts communism to 1 part freedom. The mixture as never before. The balance sheet on this way of life could be the answer to our future. But the answers so far are soft and hard to understand. Every day for a year, the Poles took the most courageous chances and made the most timid compromises. No day more courageous than October 20th, 1956, when Khrushchev flew to Warsaw to lower the boom on riotous Poland and was face down and convinced that freedoms must be allowed to this largest of Russia's satellites or it would explode. No day more terrifying than 2 weeks later when these Polish citizens saw Russia teach the Hungarians about modern revolution. Then the Poles knew their experiment in balancing freedom with communism must be born in compromise and raised delicately. The quiet revolution, which may silently shift the empire of communism off its foundations. The citizens of Warsaw who hang on the outside of its trolleys are called the Grapes. They still lack transportation, food, consumer goods, freedom as a sovereign state, liberties as individuals. The quiet revolution is fought for these 3 goals: a better standard of living, individual freedoms of religion and expression, and national independence. Warsaw's Palace of Culture was built 5 years ago by the Russians and presented to Poland as a constant reminder of Soviet friendship. It's a constant reminder of Russian dominance. And its tasteless architecture is a symbol of the Stalin era. But Polish intellectuals, backbone of the quiet revolution, are trying to stir up interest in the new architecture, all the new arts which they see in the West. But an older architecture is a more positive symbol of Poland's pride and nationalism. Behind the Palace of Culture is old Warsaw, destroyed in the war. The Poles rebuilt it, exactly in its 3 centuries-old style. Rebuilt a Renaissance city when so much else needed rebuilding because of pride in Poland's past. Poland's hatred of Russia dates in age and terror at least 400 years from Ivan the Terrible. This is Częstochowa, the shrine of Polish Catholicism, the manufacturing center for religious articles where King John Casimir dedicated the nation to the Virgin Mary 300 years ago. 98% of Poland's people are practicing Catholics. The communist government has managed to live with the church because of another acrobatic act. Gomulka struck a bargain with Cardinal Wyszynski. The cardinal has vocally supported the government. In return, has been allowed to teach religion in the public schools. In many hands, a rosary. In most homes, a cross. And they can't be sold or turned out fast enough. Last October, thousands met here, posing as pilgrims, to protest against the government's ban on celebrating the first anniversary of the defiance of Russia. Workers and students met here for several days, protesting, praying, and picnicking. Cardinal Wyszynski looked the other way, although his main support of the government has been to sprinkle cold water on those who become too restive under the compromises of Gomulka. The Cardinal and the Commissar, a partnership based on the art of the possible. Gomulka's communism has learned to live with religion and, in its need for consumer goods, with private enterprise. In Warsaw, the workday starts at 7. Quitting time is 3 o'clock, and that's shopping time, too. First, the newspapers, which are half free. Censorship in Poland, the publisher says, means we cannot yet print the whole truth, but we no longer have to print the lies. But when a publication makes 2 loud demands for speed in the slow, quiet revolution, as Poprostu did, then Gomulka silences it. But foreign papers like the Manchester Guardian and the London Times are sold publicly and daily. Food is less scarce since the quiet revolution, Because Gomulka allowed the peasants to dissolve the collective farms. This brought food into the city. In October 1956, Poland had 10,000 collective farms. Now it has but 2,000. 80% of the peasants still till their own land, sell most of their crops privately. Less swiftly than the farms, but quite clearly, Gomulka has encouraged private industry to compete with state-owned enterprises. Tens of thousands of licenses have been issued to storekeepers and artisans. Warsaw now has 4,000 privately owned shops, butchers, bakers, dressmakers, restaurants. And it has 140,000 small-scale craftsmen operating their own businesses, shoemakers, tailors, carpenters, plumbers. CDT is the big state-owned department store in Warsaw. Poor quality material and no style. Little choice of goods, and that choice hard to make because the goods are not displayed and the clerks are bored. In contrast, the crowded interest inside and outside the privately owned stores. The clerks, who are often the owners, are eager to sell because they directly profit from each sale. The goods are the best they can buy or beg from everywhere. Many come in gift parcels from the United States. In the past 18 months, 20 million razor blades were mailed to Poland for private resale. In the first 6 months of 1957, 50 tons of chewing gum arrived. In Warsaw's big open-air bazaar, hundreds of small shops, booths, and counters specialize in the goods unobtainable in government stores. Here is a crude form of the supermarket technique. The customer can test the goods at first hand and foot. It's all cash and carry. Sometimes the cashless customers seem to get carried away. Private enterprise allowed. Shoplifting is too private, too enterprising. It's a thieves' market, a free market, a flea market. If it's not there, ask for it. No changing rooms, but bravery is ever in the fashion. If it fits, wear it away. The average wage in Poland is 900 zlotys a month, about $40. A second-hand lady's coat with a California label costs 1,300 zlotys. But the ladies don't protest too much. Gomulka has encouraged private enterprise to triple during the past year. Then, after the 3 steps forward, the inevitable 1 step back for fear of offending the communist gods. In September, the government slapped prohibitive customs duties on parcels from abroad. A giant step backward for free markets like this one, which thrive on goods from overseas. The peasants near Warsaw send their goods here to sell. There is no food rationing in Poland, and since the abandonment of the collective farms, livestock and crops have increased by the hundreds of thousands. Farmers must still make minor deliveries to the state, But Gomulka has promised that when the problem of feeding the cities is eased, compulsory deliveries of food will end. The clothes for sale are usually second-hand, sent over by American relatives. Even though worn, they're better quality than the made-in-Poland clothing. They are strictly made in the U.S. But where Poland's balancing act becomes most precarious is where it touches democracy closest. Freedoms of thought, speech, teaching. Specifically, here at Warsaw Polytechnic Institute. Center of the quiet revolution a year ago. Center of the student riots this winter when the students flared up against Gomulka's silencing of Poprostu. However, the universities show more gains for real freedom than any other sphere of Polish life. The compulsory study of Marxism-Leninism was abolished a year ago. Now, courses in communist philosophy are only voluntary, and the student attendance in these courses is embarrassingly sparse. The number of students at the new courses in non-Marxist philosophy is embarrassingly large. The students have tried to scratch Stalin's name from the statue at the entrance to Warsaw Poly. The rectors of the colleges have taken over from the state increased control of faculty appointments, curricula of courses, admissions, and scholarships for students. Most of all, Poland students have exploded the theory that a generation brought up under communism is molded forever. When Poland was opened to the West a year ago, it was found that by some curious grapevine, the communist youth had kept up with many of the intellectual trends of the youth in Western countries. In France, for instance, existentialism. In the United States, the new social psychology. And, of course, jazz. 6,000 students live in this Polytechnic dormitory, 12 in each of these 24 by 30-foot rooms. Their bookshelves are filled with a flood of Western literature which has appeared in translation during the past year. Sartre and Sagan, Raymond Chandler and The Old Man and the Sea. But again, the compromise, the step backward by Gomulka. Recently, the Central Committee has been trying to restore Communist Party control of the colleges, all part of this winter's tighter control of literature and the press by the government. Several of Poland's leading writers, like poet Adam Wazik, have quit the party in protest. The students may still tune their radios to Western stations like Radio Free Europe, but the students are outspoken in their disappointment over the slow pace of the revolution. And most of Poland is living in frustration and exhaustion. The movies are their great release, but the lines at the Moskva, Warsaw's largest movie theater, are day-long. The Poles are frustrated because all problems weren't solved by the revolution. They're exhausted by a past of misery, a present of moral and economic bankruptcy. Grayness has entered the lives, the Poles say, as they point in shame to the drunkenness, shoplifting, black marketing, street vice, absenteeism, and strikes in the factories. Those who grew up in pre-war Poland and then lived under the Nazis and the Russians now face the new communism with this question: how can I change my soul for the fourth time without fear that it will become a rag? The black market outside the movie theater. Tickets can be bought for a price from the boys in the trench coats, who also sell for tastes less simple than movie-going. Enter Wright, the leader of this black market gang, Marek, a 20-year-old former locksmith. His present business is better since the October Revolution because there are fewer controls. UB, Poland's secret police, has been virtually abolished by Gomulka. Marek has never been arrested, but some of his boys have been jailed for 4 years just for ticket scalping. And he can remember the days when the boys' hair used to be cut off by policemen and their American clothes torn off. After the smug certainties of communism, freedom is too heady a draft. Not all of Poland's youth spent their time writing editorials for po prostu. During the recent years, jazz has been a ritual of protest for young communist intellectuals. Jazz, not rock and roll. The muskrats rambled through Stalin's empire and gave the young people a contact with the outside world. This student club was originally the barracks for the Russian workers who built the Palace of Culture. Jazz has been the instrument of protest for youth in communist countries since 1930. But in Poland now, more positive protests. This dance was held last October. A few blocks away, outside the Warsaw Polytechnic dormitories, the students were rioting against Gomulka's closing of po prostu. Some of these boys and girls left the dance, ran down the street singing the International in jazz rhythm, and joined in the riots. Jumping for joy and the new freedom. Gomulka walks and talks slowly because his right knee was permanently stiffened by a police bullet. His lungs weakened in jails, capitalist and communist. He works 18 hours a day and has little humor and less social grace. Everyone in Poland, Stalinist to student, is dissatisfied with him, but they listen to him. Here he is a few days after his triumph in October 1956, speaking to workers' delegations from factories in Warsaw, Zeran, Silesia. Gomulka is surrounded by party and national bigwigs, including Premier Joseph Cyrankiewicz. He tells the workers, be patient, and he is still telling them this. No one in Poland can live with him, no one will live long without him and his compromising ways. Only one fixed star in his life, communism. But this is the communist government he has set up. The secret police abolished, the Communist Party apparatus cut to the bone, 30,000 party officials quietly fired. Total party membership dwindled by 100,000 in the past year. Parliament now has an investigative committee which will serve as a buffer against the excesses of the party. Next month, Poland will hold nationwide elections for local people's councils. These councils have been used as rubber stamps by local communist leaders. But Gomulka wants to restore their independence and prestige and expand their functions. The elections will be the first test of Gomulka's popularity in over a year. Gomulka lives on the top floor of a three-story apartment in a suburb of Warsaw. He draws the pay of a simple party official. In an empty lot off one of Warsaw's main squares, there's a shack. The graveyard for old statues which have fallen or been torn off of Warsaw's public buildings. The light comes in through the broken walls and falls on the fallen gods. Lenin, who said no communism without collective farms. Behind a jeering satyr, Stalin, who let a Polish army be destroyed rather than let in one Western idea. Whoever tips the scales in Poland's balancing act, the old gods of communism have been weighed and found wanting.